Alright, hello small power class. This video is going to be all about comparing two-stroke, four-stroke, and diesel engines. With that in mind, let us start with commonalities. All three of these types of engines are internal combustion engines. This means that somewhere inside the engine, during its process, there's fire, an explosion, or combustion that pushes a piston down and turns a crankshaft and generates power. The second thing they have in common is that all three types of engines must complete the same four specific events. Those events are the intake event, the compression event, the power event, and the exhaust event. Again, all three do it different, but they must complete those four events. Let's start with the two-stroke engine and talk about some differences. Two-strokes are typically lighter because they use reed-type valves and ports as opposed to mechanical valves, which means there's no extra internal baggage like a camshaft. The second big difference with the two-stroke engine is they do not contain oil in the crankcase, which means you must pre-mix oil and fuel before operation. The other big thing is they complete all four events in two physical strokes of the engine. That's where they get their name, two-stroke, which means they also idle very fast. And a common example of a two-stroke engine in use would be that of a weed eater or a leaf blower. Advantages of the two-stroke motor is that they are lightweight, and where they don't contain oil in the crankcase, you can operate them in any direction for any amount of time. Two-strokes are also more powerful because they generate all that power in two strokes as opposed to four, like the four-stroke gas engine. Now, they do come with some disadvantages, and those are as follows. They wear out super fast. So they rev high, they operate fast, and they don't have a very complex lubrication system, which is just a recipe for disaster in terms of longevity. The second big thing is they're more expensive to operate because you're constantly buying that little two-cycle oil to put in the gas. They generate a lot more pollution, and they have horrible fuel economy. Now, let's talk about the four-stroke engines. In comparison to the two-stroke, they're a little bit more complicated. They use mechanical valves, which means they do have a camshaft, and they contain oil inside the crankcase, which means you do not pre-mix the fuel and oil before you run it. A common example of a four-stroke engine is a lawnmower or anything that we've used so far in class. And the other thing we need to backtrack and talk about is that they complete those four events in four strokes, which gives them their name, four-stroke gasoline engine. Now, advantages. Advantages of the four-stroke are as follows. They have more torque, they have better fuel economy, less pollution, and they last longer, and you don't have to buy all that extra oil. Disadvantages of the four-stroke engine are as follows. They're more complicated design, which means if something does break, it's going to be a little bit more expensive or tricky to fix. They're more expensive up front to buy, and they're typically less powerful than their two-stroke counterparts. Now, let's talk about diesel engines, our last type of today. Diesel engines of the three compared are the biggest, bulkiest, and most complex. However, they operate very similar to the four-stroke gasoline engine. However, the biggest difference there is how fuel enters the system and how it ignited. Diesel fuel itself is much different than gasoline. Gasoline engines use a spark to explode it and get the fire going. And diesel fuel must be compressed to a high temperature before it ignites, so it's a little bit different. I'll make a whole different video on that, so don't stress, but just know that it does differ from the four-stroke engine by how fuel enters and how fuel is combusted. Diesel engines typically kind of lug and chug and idle lower, and a very common example of them would be a modern tractor. Advantages of the diesel engine is that they're more powerful than the other two talked about. They're cheaper to maintain, and typically they last much longer. However, the disadvantages of the diesel engine are that they're heavier, louder, bulkier, and just take a lot more space in general. They are more expensive to purchase, so you got a lot more front-end costs, and they take a whole lot of TLC and maintenance and care to reach the longevity and perform the way they should in the long run. So now that we've discussed all three, we've talked about commonalities, advantages and disadvantages. Here are the 5 things that I want you to write down on a sheet of paper, slap your name on, turn it in the tray for this week's weekly grade. First, I want you to list 2 commonalities between the 3 types of engines. Second, list 2 differences between 2-strokes and 4-strokes, and then 4-strokes and diesel engines. Third, list 1 advantage for each type of engine. And fourth, list 1 disadvantage for each type of engine. And then lastly, for the 5th thing to write down, put 1 example of each type of engine. Hopefully this video works. If you have any questions, see me. Deuces.